Richard, it's fantastic to be connecting with you here today. I recently did an Instagram post kind of, I guess, talking about my discontent for social media, fitness industry content. It's all reaction videos and I guess short form content where you're not really getting much information across, and then that's getting parroted and it's just spreading this shitstorm of kind of not great content. And one of the people I tagged in my post are people whose content who I appreciate, and I was tagging people who I think maybe don't get the exposure they should, was you, because I think you do some of the best content for me personally that I see on like fitness social media essentially. And I'm talking about Instagram because I don't know if you're on TikTok, but your content I don't think would do so well on TikTok because it's not really TikTok, because it's mostly quotes. And one of the quotes that I really liked that you posted, and I have a bunch of them that we might dig into because I think they're just great kind of conversation starters. And this one in particular, I think we'll be able to use to dive into your background a little bit. But you said, we've got coaches trying to be influencers and we've got influencers trying to be coaches. And I'd love to hear kind of expand upon that quote, what that means to you, what your point you were trying to get across to people.
Yeah, it's essentially for me, like, when we're looking at coaches and influencers, like there was a very large separation between the two many, many years ago since they've been around. But again, we were starting to get to a point now where, people that were, I guess, quote unquote, influencing, trying to sell products and things like that were started turning into, finding it and saying, hey, it's going to be really easy to, make a quick dollar being a coach, or maybe they don't have the education to it, or they're, coaching to me, and I'm sure we'll delve into this today, is, an art form. And I think that there's a lot of people that enjoy fitness that coach that probably don't have the characteristics to make a good coach. And I feel like when I'm going across those sort of things, it's a lot of people that look at it in that regard of, this might be an easy way to make money, for influencers trying to be coaches. And then on the flip side, I think with how dopamine works with people, I think a lot of coaches see influencers with large followings and quite a bit of attention. And, they start slowly over time, maybe starting off the job doing it the right way, and then starting to move all of their social media content towards things that are going to help them with what I consider the vanity metrics. And they start losing sight of coaching, and they're trying to start chasing these vanity metrics, and the whole thing just kind of blends. And for me, I think it's not that you can't do both, but I think that it's just fascinating to me in the industry how it's sort of, people are almost just going after what they don't have. And it's, for me, coaching, as I said earlier, is an art, and it's something that I take very, very seriously, not just the hard skills, but the soft skills. And I think that there's just, I would say I was just getting a little bit of a rant, I guess is the right way to say it, about people that are entering the coaching industry because they're seeing it as a quick way to make money rather than, actually legitimately wanting to help someone.
Yeah, I think that's so well put. And I love the term vanity metrics because that is what they are. And that dopamine hit, I know it all too well because I certainly have got caught up in that myself. I often find myself, I'm like, why have I got less story views now than before? Like, what am I doing wrong? Should I post less? Should I post more? And it's weird to me. I don't know if it was the same for you, Richard, but when I first started posting on social media, YouTube, Instagram were kind of the main areas I was just sharing my journey and my process. It wasn't a time that I was in the industry, as it were. It was just, I was training to be a bodybuilder, basically. And then I started working as a one-on-one PT. And again, it was just sharing knowledge, sharing value, and that sort of thing. Even the podcast itself, this started as just a platform to talk to industry experts and share knowledge. It was never done under the guise of, I'm using this to market coaching. And now Instagram, I'm finding myself more and more like, oh, actually, that's where I get clients, is the podcast, is YouTube, and is Instagram. I need to start thinking about how I can market myself here. And then that's where I found myself getting lost in vanity metrics. I'm like, how many eyes am I getting on this? How many people am I reaching? But it's like, is that actually helping the business grow necessarily? Or am I just getting caught up in things that actually don't relate to me? And I find it personally offensive if anyone ever refers to me as an influencer, because I'm like, I guess I'm a person of influence in some sense, but I never want to be like a influencer. Like that isn't my role. I want to be known as the coach, the bodybuilder in that sense. I don't know if you relate to any of that. And when did you start on social media yourself?
I do, yeah. I 100% I agree with you on that in terms of the phrase influencer. For me, I I've had an Instagram for a really long period of time, but it wasn't up until probably about 3 or 4 years ago I started sort of posting in the style that I post in now. Um, so a little bit, excuse me, a little bit of my background is I grew up playing semi-professional basketball. I was always heavily involved in sport, heavily involved in basketball. I ended up becoming a coach, strength and conditioning coach, just because that was something that I really enjoyed while I was still playing basketball. So a lot of my stuff that I was posting, when I was posting sort of more gym, bodybuilding, coaching sort of stuff, like I was always struggling because everything sounded the same as everybody else's stuff. Um, and it wasn't until I sort of I used to, from a coach's point of view, I used to always sort of gravitate more towards the soft skills of coaching, like the communication side of things and things like that from sports coaches, basketball coaches, NBA, football coaches and things like that, and how they would talk about how they have to communicate, manage egos and things like that. So I tended to gravitate towards that just because it's what I'd grown up in. And I think when I started posting my social media posts, I started utilizing that a little bit more because, w- and again, it comes back to that influencer sort of thing is, I see that there's a lot of people that are coaching that love bodybuilding or they love health and fitness or whatnot. But then when it came to actually translating that information, like the hard skills of the sets, the reps, things like that, but actually understanding how to translate it to different people and how to manage personalities, there just wasn't any real content in it. So I was, just putting out originally a few things that were, just maybe something that I was dealing with one of my clients. And I'm like, oh, that was cool. Maybe I'll explain how I did that. And then, yeah, it just sort of started taking off and a lot of people were, messaging and replying and people were asking for mentoring just because it was, stuff that they would bring case studies in for their clients and I would just sort of sit down and have a look at it, maybe try to help them word or phrase different things to try to get a result out of them that might be a little bit, maybe using analogies or different wordplay to try to motivate them or something like that. And yeah, and it's just sort of taken off. And the more it took off, the more I realized there was a niche for it. And I ended up, just that's a lot of what I study now, because a lot of my clientele and a lot of, I think most people's clientele, like a lot of people have the hard skill knowledge to be able to get them results, but where they lack is just bridging the gap between, you know, understanding what those skills are and being able to translate it to them in a way that is going to get them adherent towards, doing it all. So
That makes
a
a
little
lot
bit
of
of a,
sense.
yeah, a little bit of a roundabout way on that, but yeah. So my social media is essentially, the last couple years is I've just sort of driven it more towards the art of coaching because, you go on social media and you see everything is sets and reps, everything is, and there's so much great information out there. And for me, there just wasn't a great deal of, coaching, which is when I say coaching, it's teaching people the skills that we learn. So yeah, it's just something that I've always been really interested in. So I sort of just try to, put my own little twist on it and, hopefully inspire some thought. That's what I said on a post the other day is whereas I'm not trying to, not trying to use punchline content too much or anything that's going to, give you all the answers, but just, some information or some things that will inspire people to think a little bit deeper in what they're doing. And hopefully they'll read it and go, oh yeah, maybe that is something I need to look into more. So yeah, that's generally the goal with it now.
Yeah, I love that. I guess would you frame some of your content and where you like to learn now kind of sports psychology? Is that what you'd kind of frame it under as a guise? I
It,
see insights into sports psychology within your posts for sure.
yeah. So Yes, I like to label it mental performance.
Sure.
Personally, yeah, but I mean, a lot of it all blends in together. And one of my mentors here in Perth, Australia, is she's a performance psychologist for a lot of the professional sporting clubs over here. So I've done a lot of mentoring with her, and she's um, sort of helped me with exercises that I can give to clients in certain situations to manage anxiety and stress and things like that. So, yeah, it does. It's definitely, there's aspects to it. But yeah, I tend to label it under mental performance, because I think there's also a lot of people that are, I would never want to discredit people because I haven't done psychology at university or something in that regard. So I would never want to be a person that's, claiming that I do something or know something when I haven't done the actual sort of background education around it. So I do try to separate that word, but obviously it's, mental performance and psychology all sort of does blend into one. But yeah, in terms of it, I try to pull myself away from that terminology because it upsets people sometimes, which
For sure.
with good reason. Yeah, with good reason too.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And yeah, it's just so interesting to me as I've got deeper into my coaching career and deeper into my kind of bodybuilding career, as it were, the more I've been reading and learning from sports psychology books and people within that space, because I find often I get more value from a little bit of a kind of mental cue that they might give me versus, I don't know, another research paper coming out about a certain topic. So I already have quite a good knowledge base in that, but actually this is an area where I haven't tapped into that mental side of things. So it's really cool that you've tapped there. And the listeners, if they didn't pick up on it, you've been in the industry for a long time, 2006, right?
Yeah, about that. Yeah, I think so. 2000 and yeah, to the end of 2006.
Yeah, so that's crazy to me. And as we were talking off air, you said you listened to this podcast, you kind of grew up on it, and I was like, oh, how old are you, Richard? Because I didn't think you were quite that young. And then, yeah, you're in your late 30s, so a little bit older than me actually. But looking at you and anyone listening, if you're not seeing Richard, it looks, I don't know, you look 30 years old maybe. You're aging well. What's the secret there?
I'll take that as a compliment. There you go.
Full head of hair. You're beating me at least on that front. But you came from. I didn't realize how tall are you then, Richard? Because if you're doing the kind of
Oh, I'm not
professional
tall at all. I'm
basketball.
like, so I was listed playing basketball. I was listed at like 5'10".
Okay,
Yeah,
same
yeah.
height as
So
me.
yeah, yeah.
You've
So I
never
played.
competed in physique sports, is that right?
No, so I've done powerlifting, strongman. I did Olympic
Okay,
lifting. So I've done a lot. I've done those. I'm not going to sit here and say at a high level. I've done them. I've done them all, but it's more for the experience of doing it. I haven't done bodybuilding. It's ironic because I've coached bodybuilding for, I've got coached pro athletes in almost every federation there is. I absolutely love bodybuilding. I love the training for it. I love the manipulation of body composition. It absolutely fascinates me, but just the tanning up and posing on stage is not for me. Um, so I have a famous sort of quote on social media with like, you can be a bodybuilder without being a competitive bodybuilder.
yeah. Oh,
And
yeah, and I completely agree with that.
so that's how I kind of label that. So I'm like, am I a bodybuilder? Well, I've trained for hypertrophy for a very, very long time. Am I a competitive bodybuilder? I haven't gotten on stage.
That's how I like differentiate them as well. Because
Mm.
some of my clients, I don't know, they sometimes feel like they have a bit of an identity crisis because they don't feel like they can call themselves a bodybuilder. And I was like, hey, you eat like a bodybuilder, you train like a bodybuilder, you like respect the bodybuilding lifestyle. You just haven't stood on stage. The only difference is you're not a competitive bodybuilder. And
Yeah.
that's how I draw the line. I don't have an attachment as a bodybuilder because I've competed. It's like, oh, you can't call yourself a bodybuilder, Richard. Like, it's like you do the bodybuilding. You are a bodybuilder.
There's so many people that are funny about that as well. Like it surprises me that's a thing. Like, you can play basketball all your life, but just not play competitively. And, you still play basketball.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, yeah, it is a thing. But yeah, I mean, for me personally, like I said, I trained for bodybuilding for a long period of time, just not competitive bodybuilding.
And are you originally from the US? Because
Yeah.
listening to your accent, I don't know if I've actually heard you speak long form before. And I'm like, this isn't an Australian here, at least the accent.
Yeah. Apologies for that. I have, the first time I got on a podcast and with Alan Aragon, and I think the first 5 minutes of it was him just telling me how disappointed he was that I didn't have an Australian accent. Um, But yeah, I from the U.S. My whole family's from the U.S. from Columbus, Ohio, where the Arnold's just was. But I moved over here quite young with my parents' work. So I've lived in Australia the majority of my life. But yeah, whole family's from the U.S. So their accents are very strong. So I guess I kept that and didn't have the Australian accent.
Yeah, that's cool. I anything that's not like people. I get told from people who aren't British, they love the British accent. I'm like, I love
Mhm.
anything that isn't the British accent. So
Yeah.
American, Australian. I'm not. I wasn't too disappointed. Don't you worry.
I'm in that funny place where when I'm in Australia, everybody thinks I sound American, but then when I go back to the US, everybody thinks I have like an Australian twang in my accent. So I'm kind of like in no man's land. Like it doesn't matter where I go, I don't fit in.
Yeah, I
So
think there's some. I know there's some people around the UK, if because you'll probably know there's different dialects and like accents
mm,
all over the shop. You do kind of bring it with you, and like some twangs come out in certain words. It's quite funny. So yeah,
right.
the people are probably noticing that, and me not being American or like Australian, I'm not picking it up just yet. But talking about the people, so it sounds like your training personally is more bodybuilding focused. Is your clientele also strictly bodybuilding? From the outside in, that's the way I viewed it. But is it mostly just working with competitors?
So I still do a little bit of strength and conditioning work. I used to do it for clubs. So I would work like preseasons with the entire team and things like that, but I just do it privately now. So a lot of the players in the off season will come and train and do one-on-one stuff. But I've only got a handful of those guys now, but the majority, I would say probably 40% are competitive bodybuilders. And then I've got probably another 30%, 40% that are, the non-competitive physique people,
Yeah,
body composition, just, training to look better, but not competing in bodybuilding. But I do have a very large demographic of competitive bodybuilders, and I've got them for NPC, WNBF, ICN, NBA, all so a lot of the federations, and yeah, I've been doing that for about 14 years now. So yeah,
awesome.
it's a little bit of a I can't do all bodybuilding. Like it's a I need to have like that sort of variety for myself. Like I think I'll go crazy
Sure.
just doing too much of one than the other. But if it's all body composition, I'm good. And then for some people, it's whether we're phasing to get on stage or we're phasing to sustainably build a physique that they're happy with all year round.
It's interesting because, at least for me, when I started one-on-one PT, obviously you can't really choose. It's whoever's in the gym, especially when you first start. Like I'm not picking my clients, I'm getting them through the gym or whatever. But I was posting did my first contest prep 2014, so I was posting that and sharing that. So then people were coming to me for like body composition changes, and then down the line I started building a bit of a competitive roster, similar to you. I don't know, I think I coach less competitors than you actually. Maybe 20% of my roster are actually competitors, and then another 20 to 40 are like bodybuilders who want to then compete. And then there's a small amount who they never want to compete and they just love kind of bodybuilding as the pursuit and the lifestyle. But it's interesting because you never competed yourself. So you kind of found yourself working with these people without having that personal experience. How did you get into that sort of situation?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and this is something that like I'm really really proud of. Is I don't necessarily like I don't look bad, I don't look out of shape, but I don't look like a bodybuilder, and I was still able to build a very large clientele of competitive bodybuilders. So I'm very very proud of that. That I've been able to have it through referrals, word of mouth, and things like that. But essentially I had when I was younger, and the standards of the bodybuilding shows maybe weren't quite as high 15 years ago, and I had a person that said that they wanted to do it, and I said, look, I'll go away and have a look and see if I can learn how to do it. And I went and got a IAPC course, I believe it was called, which basically gave you the rundown of how to contest prep somebody. And I did the course, I ran through it with them. Um, they did a great job. They ended up actually winning their open class and losing the overall. And I had a couple more people come on as referrals from there, and one of them ended up winning the overall in the next show. And I was okay. This is kind of fun. We're not bad at this, and it just sort of sparked my interest. And I don't know, one thing's led to another, and yeah, here we are. But it's so much fun. Like I have so much fun doing it. It's so fascinating just how the body works, and it's helped carry over, for general population. It helped me when because I was still working in strength and conditioning with basketball and football and Australian rules football players then, and it helped me in that regard as well. So it was just something that was really good to do, and then just through referrals and luckily, very luckily, the first 5 or 6 clients that I had did really, really well. And, I mean, you know how it is. If you get a few show wins and all of a sudden everybody wants to coach. And yeah, and just sort of the demand was there. I kept going with it. I just kept learning and learning. And yeah, here we are.
Yeah, I think it's some people might say, "Oh, that's lucky," but it's like, well, luck is something that you can't depend upon. But you've been in
Mhm.
the industry and grown your coaching to the size and continue to get competitors to stage being very successful. So if it was just all luck, you wouldn't have continued to be in the position that you're in. It reminds me of, if you'll be aware of Cliff Wilson. I
Yeah.
think his initial kind of introduction to the space was very similar, where it's just like some mates he helped out, he talked to, and then they referred and referred because they were getting great results. So I kind of like those grassroots ways into the industry as well. It's somewhat similar to how I got into the online space too, like helping people in my local gym, and then they just talked to their mates and kind of referred out. I guess that space has changed quite a lot now. But you talked about the Arnold, actually talking about something, at least at the time this comes out, it would have been probably a month ago that it all happened. But did you watch much of it? Did you watch the live stream or anything like that? Have you seen
Yeah,
the results and things?
I watched the results of it. We just because of the time difference, it's kind of hard to watch because it's, we're looking at very, very early in the morning, very late at night for both of the shows. So the finals were on at about 11 o'clock, but we actually had an event, a bodybuilding event for like a posing workshop that for one of the federations. So we ended up there. So I didn't actually get to watch too much of it this time, but obviously I kept up to date with it. And yeah, a little bit of drama in the bodybuilding, wasn't there?
With Martin just, yeah, kind of losing his head a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how I completely feel. Like, part of me is very resistant to the way he reacted, and because it's just so not like me, and I don't think that's how competitors and athletes should conduct themselves at all. But part of me is also like, I don't know how old he is, but he's clearly like quite headed, and he's emotional. He's not being fake. He's being himself. But
Mm.
I think he even physically did something like shoved Nick or something, which is
Yeah, I
one
did read some.
thing. Yeah, it's one thing having words and like showing clapping when he heard Nick came second, is another thing to be physically, like, I don't want to say abusive, but that's another level of, I don't agree with his actions full stop, but I kind of understand how, like,
Yeah.
him being himself, and I kind of respect that in some regard, but it's not how I would behave myself as a professional athlete, and
Mhm.
I, yeah, wouldn't like to see many others do it. But did you agree with the results that you saw?
Yeah, I mean, from what I judge a fair bit within Australia and in India, and I think one thing that I've learned is like it doesn't matter how good the quality of the videos or footage is, like unless you're sitting in that front row, you obviously, I mean, you're gonna know this just as well, obviously judging WNBF as well, but like, it's you never know. But from what I saw, and bear in mind, all I saw was stuff through Instagram. But yeah, I don't necessarily think I disagreed with anything there. I thought um like the bikini I thought was really good. Um and yeah, I think that yeah, I didn't have anything. You'll know this better, better than anyone, but like there's sometimes where when you get to that top level, like when you're judging the professionals at the top level, that like there's points where it's like you can start making arguments either direction. And like you look at both two people and you're like, they're both winners. And it's like whichever way the judge has that subjectivity of where they follow is going to win. But like you can make very strong arguments for multiple people on if they win that I don't think anybody will complain. And I think that, obviously at that top level, there is a lot of that happens.
Yeah, I can tell you've judged for sure when you say, especially saying like it's one thing to. I literally commented on someone's post today where they talked about, I think it was they didn't think Martin should even have come fourth, and I forget why have I forgotten his name. He came fifth, but he's previously Mr. Olympia. I've forgotten his name for some reason. His name's completely gone out of my head. But yeah, he was basically making an argument of like, hey, this guy should have been here, and I just said, hey, like from this footage, I agree with you, but there's one thing saying it via footage or even several seats back in the crowd. Is another thing being in that judge's chair. And also, I wonder what your thoughts are on this in regards to the fact that something that was really eye-opening for me when I judged was just the demand and the speed of which you need to judge. When you're a competitor on stage, you're not really thinking about, like, it feels actually fast. A lot of the time people talk about it, maybe they're like 10 minutes on stage or something. It's like, that was really quick. And like the judges only have a certain amount of time and you have to make calls. People often think, oh, judging must be perfect, where you compare literally every single person, front pose, side pose, and you're like ranking them, and they like you have this perfect algorithm of where they're going to be. But you have to make judging like quick decisions, right? At least that was a big eye opener for me, where that then allowed me to be a better coach to my competitors and a better competitor. I was like, you need to be on from the get-go. There is no second chances. You need to catch the judge's attention, and you need to hit your poses very effectively early on, because the judges they have to make quick calls because there's not infinite time.
It is, and you add stress into the situation, and pressure gets higher. And I think that is one thing. It's very easy to look at things sometimes, and you can look at a photo for 10 seconds in the front pose and then go, well, let's look at every single little thing here on both of them. And then it's like, you don't have that time. So you've got to, and that sometimes when people complain that they get sent around a bunch of times, and it's like, sometimes, you have to, like, it's because you want to get it as right as you possibly can. And there's always going to be people that are going to disagree. And, it's one of those things and that's one of the biggest things I learned with judging is like, sometimes someone will come in first and second and they'll make an argument for it. And, you can see where they're coming from. But it's just not the way the table viewed that situation. And it's like, it's not that they're necessarily going to be, they complete a strong case. It's just the subjectivity of the sport. And, sometimes you get that. And then other times you get, people that are in the third call out that are upset that they weren't top two. And then, it's tougher than people think it is. And like, I use, for example, we did the, just last year, we did in Goa, in India, we did the ICN, Indian show, and they had 865 competitors over 2 days. And it was like 85%, just culturally, it's more men than women. So there was, I think there was 15 or 16 open classes of men's physique, and each class had 18 people.
Gee.
And this is just men's physique. And this is just, they have the first timer division and the age groups and all these sort of things. So like, it's when the shows get bigger like that as well, it gets really difficult, and it's a far harder job. And, when you talk about the speed, it's 100% right, because you've got to make quick decisions, and you've got to, immediately catching the judge's eye becomes absolutely vital. And then there's people that will talk about, the board shorts or bikini colors or something like that. And it's like, how much of a difference does it really make? It's like a lot. Like, if someone, stands out with, we always sort of say, with like a red bikini and blonde hair, or, that's something that just draws your attention to it. And, it is one of those things that, you're absolutely right. The speed of it can change things. So, you couldn't have said it better when saying you got to be on from like the get-go, because you get laid into a pose and, we're looking at everybody in the pose, and then we have to come back to that person at the end. And
Yeah, very well said. Just so people know, Brandon Curry was fifth. I just remembered that was the person who was between him and Mike. So yeah, and very well said. And the main take home I at least want the listeners for is like, don't be like a social media judge. Like, you just see so many people doing that, and just, you've got two judges talking here and who have judged many, many shows. It's just very different when you're sat in that chair. You've got that perspective, and you're making the calls from there. And I think it's it's as perfect of a setup as we can get. And like you said, there's subjectivities, but also there's like subconscious things, like you said, the red like suit
Yeah.
or the blonde hair, like things stand out, or people pose in a way that kind of like a weird way of saying it, turns you on, turns you off. Like people can pose in ways that they look overly arrogant, other people look really present and like, I don't know, they're happy to be there, other people look like they want to go home. And not that that should influence the judging necessarily, but it's subconsciously there might be something there that is intangibles. So yeah, as a competitor, these are some of the art of coaching, of course. And like even little things like turn towards the judges if you're on the outside of the lineup, right? The
Oh
number of
God,
people that
yeah.
don't even like, it
The
becomes
one, the
obvious once
one,
you've competed a few times.
the one that always gets me is like in men's physique, for example, when people bring their arm out and they just won't stop spinning their wrist. Like
Yeah.
they'll do the pose and it's just like your eyes just go to the hand because it's moving, and it's like, just get into position and sit still so that we can. And it's just like, if it's one of those things where like if that hand is constantly moving and I'm distracted from it, it hurts you. So yeah, there's so many little things like that experienced competitors will learn over time and get better at as they get, feel less pressure on stage and whatnot. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Richard, to change the script a little bit, you mentioned off air that you travel quite a lot. And I was just interested, I think you have your own facility, if I'm not wrong, but
I
you also
did up
travel quite a
until
lot. Or you
July.
did.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. I'd love to hear a bit about what that looks like for you as like for your career and your coaching.
Yeah. So I had a facility up until I had it for about 8 years, 9 years. And it just worked. It was, doing 45 personal training sessions a week. And then, things move online a little bit more, cost of living goes up, insurances are going up, and it just wasn't, it wasn't a viable thing to do anymore. Financially. So we closed that down. But yeah, look, my travel is great. I've got a couple clients that travel around the world, and I'll always, one thing that I really try to pride myself on is trying to be there for shows for people. So when I have clients that have shows in other countries or whatnot, I'll always do my best to try to get out to them. Not just, obviously it helps the client, but it's also a good way for me to be able to, experience bodybuilding in different, countries. It's very different from country to country. You get to learn a lot more. You get to become a better coach, get to network with people. And so in terms of clients, I do traveling a fair bit for that. And then, yeah, travel. I do a lot of in-person workshops, which I travel mostly around Australia. I'm actually going to Singapore in a few weeks with Eric Helms, and I'm going to be talking at one of his things, and a few other places in Asia at the end of the year. So I really enjoyed just going out and meeting people and just seeing the, health and fitness industry, the bodybuilding industry, in different places, because even though the core principles are all the same, it's so fascinating for me to sort of learn about, how everything operates, how the shows operate, how people look at education, and how, what sort of things people are doing with their clients. And because there's so many similarities, but then there's so many differences as well. So it's like, it's good for me to be able to learn and just sort of meet people. And I absolutely love it. Like it's one of those things that I try to do as much as humanly possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. And thankfully, as an online coach, really you just need, so I don't know how you actually be interested to hear about this, but for mine, at least I need a solid internet connection and like a quiet space, because I do video like check-in reports.
Yep.
So client will send across a video, I'll make notes, and then I'll review that and send them across a video back, kind of talking through things. Is that a similar setup to you, or do you do more text-based or have a different
No,
setup?
I do mine. So I use, I'll get a check-in form from clients, and then I'll do a Loom video, essentially, where I'll go through breakdown technique, breakdown progress photos, make any adjustments, and yeah. So yeah, same for me. Laptop, good internet, and I'll be good to go. Just set up my Loom videos and shoot them across as I'm getting the check-ins. So it is very easy, and I'm very lucky to be able to do that and be able to travel at the same sort of time.
Hi guys, Steve here. Just wanted to take a moment of your time to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we pride ourselves on providing personalized service that will take your physique and knowledge to the next level. If you're interested, check the description and sign up.
Yeah, I can, some days I like wake up and I come to my office and this desk and I'm like, man, I'm so grateful to be able to do what I do, because it really just allows me to do other things in life that I love. And one of those, I think I'm a little bit different to you. I do like traveling, but I'm absolutely a homebody. So I like traveling, but not too much. But also I know as a competitor, to be my best in bodybuilding, like it's so important to have my schedule, routine, my sleep, like my food, like in as easy and manageable place as possible, so I can put everything into my training. And I guess for you, because you're training, I mean, I'm not saying you deprioritize it versus me, but maybe you do that. Like sometimes you're like, hey, I can sacrifice that a little bit to put more into the travel and things like this. I know that makes me a little bit less flexible, but it's like finding that balance.
Yeah. And I mean, again, it's the same. Balance is, what is balance, right? Like, you have the perfect balance for you. I have the perfect balance for me. So, it's one of those things that, I think the best way about it is you can sort of, we both have the flexibility to build it how we want to build it.
Yep.
And I think it's really important, and it's, as coaches, we're super lucky to be able to do that. Obviously I'll still train everywhere that I go. But for me, I find myself training, unless I'm in Perth, I'm training with, intensity is my gauge of, what I'm training. And it's, am I jet lagged? Am I going to 3 to 4 reps in reserve, or am I going to stay at 1? Obviously with different equipment and stuff like that. So, yeah, but I mean, if I'm away, that's how it'll be. If it's here, then it's business as usual, tracking, moving numbers up every week. And yeah, so, I think, like I said, it's, that whole thing again with the balances, it's just, everybody's version of balance looks very, very different. So, the fact that we're both able to find what we like to do. And I think that's the beauty in, our job, is we can make it whatever we essentially want to make it.
Very true. Yeah. And I encourage my clients to do this too. You'll probably have the same thing with your competitors, I imagine, where I don't want them to become so rigid. Like I want them to become like, have flexibility within it. Like your structure and routine is only as good as when it can, like if something comes up, you can flex and you can be kind of resourceful to be able to troubleshoot it and work around it. And if you can't, and it just everything breaks, that's no good. Like you don't want to be a prisoner to that. You want to have it to work for you. And one of the ways, at least I've done that to help myself, is I did buy a new laptop this year, because I work off a desktop most of the time, because it's just I mostly work on my desk. But having the laptop has encouraged me to travel a little bit more and use that, which has been nice, because I've been able to take the routine and the structure and everything I have with me, which has been good. I'll be closer to you in July, hopefully, if all things run smoothly, because I'm doing a bodybuilding camp.
Yeah, I was literally about to say that you're going to Bali, which is about a 2 hour.
That's going to be crazy.
Yeah, it's about a 3-hour flight from where I am. So,
have you been before
to Bali?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like that's a down the road sort of thing from Perth. It's like
nice.
That's the weekend holiday spot. But yeah, it's awesome. I haven't actually been to Undefeated yet. But it looks amazing, and I've heard so many good things about it. So I think that'll be you'll have an awesome trip with that. And obviously Brandon's going to look after you, because, Brandon's, he'll make sure that if it's, you'll be treated like royalty over there, which will be amazing. I think you'll have the best time over there. So hopefully,
I can't wait.
It's a bit of a track for you, though.
Yeah, the flight, I need to book it this week, actually. We've got a deadline this week Brandon's given us, and it's looking like, I think it's 17 hours to maybe 18 hours on the way out, and then like 19 on the way back. And that's pretty good going. But flying, again, traveling, I'm not a great flyer. Like there's I get very anxious. It's like being out of control. Typical bodybuilder loves controlling every single thing and being up in the air in a giant metal bird. I'm like, nah, this is too out of my comfort zone sometimes. But if there's not turbulence, I'm okay. It's the turbulence that gets
those longer flights are, the planes are a little bit bigger, and it's a little bit more comfortable on those longer flights. It's those short ones that stress on the smaller planes that hit the turbulence and the wind. That the bigger planes, you don't get much turbulence. So you'll probably have a nice smooth flight over there, and catch up on a whole bunch of sleep, hopefully.
Yeah, I'm very excited for it. It's going to be a good time. And yeah, I mean, if anyone is listening who's in that near around that location, come and join us in July. That'll be a lot of fun. To quote you again, Richard, to come back to some of these great posts that you have, you had one that was average athletes don't like constructive feedback. They get defensive. Elite athletes want it. They understand it's going to get them better. I'd love to hear your perspective on that and how you came to making that post.
Yeah. So, this one was something that there's a little bit, I got time. I'll give you a little bit of background on this one.
Yeah.
So growing up in playing sport versus bodybuilding, and I actually talk about this in one of my workshops, is there's a very large difference between, and you'll see this was a bit of a rant of a post as well. But when you are growing up playing sport, you play obviously from a very, very young age, you learn a lot of lessons, and you don't necessarily get to the professional level without being a coachable athlete. Like, you just won't get there. Bodybuilding is something that you can start a little bit later in life. You have, genetical factors, things like that, where sometimes, being coachable and being pro can be two separate things. So I have one of my workshops is all about, this is why I say elite athletes and not professional athletes, because you can kind of be professional and not elite, but you can be elite and not professional too. And just going back on that post, which was like, a really big difference that I was dealing with coaching some high-level bodybuilders versus when I was working in sport. And it's when you're starting to coach the more professional athletes in basketball or Australian football, is they're all very coachable. And that's a reason that they got to where they got to. And because they've been playing since they were 8 years old, and they've learned these lessons through different coaches and whatnot going through. And it was just one of those things where, I was hitting a lot of road bumps with people by, having certain athletes that were just not being coachable. And it was like, your physique can take you to the next level, but what's stopping you is your, every time I try to correct you in something, it's palming blame off on somebody else, or there's a reason for it, or it's not. Whereas, like, it was just something that I wasn't used to when I was dealing with the higher level sports athletes, because it didn't happen. And it was just one of those things where it's like, it's just different. And, when I was looking at these athletes, and like, I start looking at bodybuilding a little bit closer, and it's like, okay, there are pro athletes that I work with in bodybuilding that are not overly coachable. But then there's athletes that maybe aren't pro, that are maybe not quite as genetically gifted, that are super, super coachable. And if we look at the progression they've made from where they started to where they get to, even though a certain athlete might not go pro, they're hitting their full potential more. Like, they're getting closer to their full potential than potentially what some of these people in the pro ranks are doing. And so it's just one of those things for me where I was looking at it. It's like, there's a lot of athletes, and it's not just like, oh, they've got a pro card, so they're going to be perfect. And it's like, it's not the case. And it was just one of those sort of situations where I was just sort of, looking at things from a whole. And it's like, I'm seeing this far more, like, people getting defensive when they're trying to be corrected in physique sports than I am in some of the pro sports. And I was like, why is that? And then sort of, things are clicking, and it's like, well, these guys have learned these lessons, and they don't get to these levels, they won't get picked on, they won't get selected on squads if they're going to be hard to deal with. Whereas in bodybuilding and physique sports, it was a little bit different. So it was just an observation about it. And, as I say again, I will always have people that will message and be like, is this about me? And it's like, no, I'm just trying to, just trying to inspire thought. And it can be taken in many different contexts. I have a lot of people that see it positively, a lot of people that see it negatively, but, the goal of it is, to try to inspire some thought into coaches and things like that, or even for that one in particular, with athletes, to sit back and say, am I coachable? Am I being an elite athlete? Is there something that I could do better? And, that's, again, the whole point of why I do those posts, because it's just, a lot of the time I don't even have the answer to these sort of things. It's just, black and white thoughts that I'm putting onto paper. And that one seemed to be quite popular. I think that one got about 25,000 shares. So, yeah, I'm glad it, inspired people to think about themselves or their athletes, and hopefully find some positive in it to try to, get themselves or get their athletes better.
Yeah. Yeah, I should finish the quote as well because it was really good. You said, I've seen genetical freaks who get so comfortable winning at an early amateur level, they don't improve. I've seen some athletes who use effort to their advantage and go from middle of the pack to professional ranks. Effort doesn't always show straight away, and that's why you see many athletes never continue or progress. And I just think it's the take home I saw was like, effort's important, but also like applying it appropriately is also important.
Absolutely.
And I think if you've gone to a coach, you've gone to a coach for a reason, right? You need to listen to them and like try, and that can be uncomfortable, especially if someone's gone pro already off their own back. It's like, hey, like I got here without you, so like if you're telling me to do something I don't really want to do, I kind of trust myself. But they have to open themselves up to potentially getting better, because that's why they've come to you in the first place. But there's definitely people who are more coachable than others. Do you ever find it, Richard, where people are, I don't know if it's to the point of being too coachable, where it's like they offload everything on you? They're like, they don't want to think about anything. You ask them a question and they just are like, they don't want to hear you ask questions about how they're feeling or what they're seeing or anything they're doing. They just tell me what to do, and that's all I worry about, and I can be a robot.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's you see that very frequently. For this, and again, this is just from my experience, but sort of from like more of the like Asian demographic. They're very, very much like that, to a point where, and Brandon and I had a conversation about this as well, where sometimes they will, they won't tell you when they're struggling, because they want to, make sure that, everything just has to be done by them. And you're 100% right. And then, that can become a problem in itself, which I think is, another reason why, finding ways and understanding individuals, communication styles is very, very important, because, as much as, all coaches and, it's popularized on social media to talk about, athletes that just don't listen, you still also have to deal with that other end of the spectrum where, they don't, like, as you said, they don't want to think for themselves. And, that's going to be something that's going to harm their progress, long term as well. So again, it's just about understanding that communication level, and then, finding ways and trying to find mutual understandings of how you're going to, what you expect them to talk to you about, and things like that. So yeah, you're right. That's something that's not spoken about quite as much. But it's definitely something that can be difficult to navigate, as a coach. And sometimes it just takes time and trust to, allow the athlete to know that, it's not a dictatorship. Like, all coaching is a collaboration, because, you understand the science of it, but they're, people are complex, and how you apply the science is going to be very different from person to person. So, sometimes it can be about setting standards for that, for people, and, developing trust and things in that regard. And yeah, it's one of the many complexities of coaching that you have to navigate to try to help somebody get to their full potential. So I definitely, it's a good thing that you brought that up, because I think that's something, like I said, that just not many people, people look at it and say, this is, athletes will be like, I want to be coached, and, they push it too far in that regard. So yeah, it's not spoken about a lot, but it's definitely a tricky situation to navigate.
I think putting an example would be really good, because you kind of mentioned it there with Brandon, and saying how like people they don't communicate how beat up they feel, whatever. I know I've spoken about this before with Mike Chalice, who's another coach and physio on our team. And when we took him through his first prep, I coached him to stage, and he has a very stoic, kind of almost Buddhist philosophy, and like he feels no pain, no discomfort, everything's great, which is awesome to have. And I knew that about him, but I still thought he'd communicate to me if he felt terrible and things were not going well. But it was almost like he like offloaded those thoughts and just wasn't ready to kind of accept and feel them, to the point where we ended up digging him into too far of a hole. And this is a great lesson for us both. But that's where you can kind of ignore and not feed back to your coach because you think you should feel a certain way. But it's like, hey, remove all like of expectations, just actually tell me how you feel, and then like I'll do what I need to do with that. And so that can be helpful. But I think you probably would agree with this too, that clients need to give their coaches, I guess, the ability to make mistakes too. Because I think sometimes, especially very good clients or athletes, expect their coaches to get everything right always. But any good coach makes mistakes and you learn from them. And the best coach-client relationships, I see at least, are those where they're long-term, you make mistakes together, you learn together, and you get better together. Because if you keep coach hopping every time a coach makes a mistake, that coach is never getting a chance to learn you and kind of make improvements. Do you see that yourself as well?
Yes. So I've got, first of all, Mike's actually doing in my certification academy at the moment. So he's going to be
awesome.
doing so he's going to be doing a whole bunch of stuff on communication between athletes and clients. So hopefully that smooths out preps for the future as well. But yeah, you're 100% right. You know, I have one of the IFBB Pro bikini girls that I do regular traveling with. You know, I've coached her through probably 15 or 16 shows now. And you know, we collaborate very, very well in terms of, you know, she'll tell me, look, I thought this, I didn't feel that. And, you know, she knows her physique really well. You know, and we sort of collaborate decisions that we, you know, think maybe peeking into a show or, you know, diet breaking or whatever it might be. And we work really collaboratively together, and we've got so much data from, you know, previous years on how far out we should start the diet for the show, you know, how far we can push her, how far, all of these sort of things. And we work really, really well together because, you know, we're both super open with, you know, collaborating things, and you know, she may come with some ideas that I'll be like, oh, I think that actually could work, or I might say, you know, that's crazy, let's don't ever bring that up again, as you know, as a joke. But like, you know, it's but we end up, you know, working together, and you know, we've achieved some, you know, going, you know, not making the first call out in amateur shows to, you know, getting top 8 in some of the bigger pro shows in the US. So I don't think we would have got to that position if we weren't collaborating in that way. I think if it was like a pure sort of dictatorship of coaching, I don't think that, you know, I would have the data that I would need to make the best decisions for. So I think, yeah, you're right. It's a really good thing when athletes are comfortable with, you know, bringing out how they feel, what they think. And you know, a lot of the time it's, you know, the right way to go, or the potential best way to go, is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, really nice. I love that you guys have worked together that long to get to amateur and then doing so well now. And I often think about this with like trainees. It's really good when you're first learning to train, just like pick up a great program online. It might be Jeff Nippard's. You find one of Jeff Nippard's program perfect. It's training wheels. You don't know what you're doing. You'll get better results following that than trying to do your own thing. And then once you kind of run that and you're like, I need a bit more volume here, or that's not quite working here, then you can start individualizing it and taking control yourself a little bit more. And I view it similarly with coaching. At least when I first bring athletes on, like, you don't necessarily have full trust in one another and how one another work and tick. So I'm a bit more like, okay, we're kind of create this program, but it's not going to be the perfect program. We'll have to iterate and kind of adjust as we go. And as you do that longer and longer and longer, and they understand what you're looking for, and you can trust that they're going to execute it just as you want, and they're going to do what you need, you can start offloading a little bit more. It can become even more collaborative, where they start maybe taking control of some things or making decisions at times where normally you would, but they can be a bit more proactive and do various aspects of that. And that's then like, that's the perfect situation to be in. That's where coaching, that collaboration works in such good synergy. But it takes a while to get to that point, which, yeah, it sounds like you've been able to get there with a number of your clients, and now it allows them to see their full potential, I think.
One of and I'll shout out one of my mentors, Dean McKillop. He's a coach. He lives in Spain now, but he's an Australian coach. Coaches multiple IF. He's good friends with Joe Jeffrey and all those guys.
Is he part of Flex? His company
Yes.
Flex?
Yeah. Flex. Yeah. So he's the owner of Flex. And he has a thing he had taught me with a lot of his athletes is what he did. And bear in mind, like when I'm saying this, the context is he works with majority of his athletes are pro classic and bodybuilders and the IFBB, or they're, relatively experienced bodybuilders. But what he will do is give them a list of like body parts and the exercises you really enjoy doing and you get great mind muscle connection with, put them down when he first starts with them. And he will build programs based off of that, so that he's trying to build trust and make sure athletes are getting exercises that they're comfortable with using, that they've used for a long period of time. And he'll just sort of make adjustments based off of that. But that's a way that he starts his. And I've done that with a couple of my more experienced sort of clients that I've brought on that we're at an experienced level, and I've had great success with it. I think not only from the training aspect of it, but also just from the building buy-in, which I think is as important at the very start. And I think that when you're showed to your athletes that you're open, that you're not just trying to, like I said, be a dictator with it, and say, this is my strategy, this is what I'm doing, but it just kind of opens that door for collaboration from the get-go. And that was something that he had told me about, and I've used that with great success over the years now.
Yeah. No, that's really well said. And I think if someone has got themselves to that level, they've certainly know like some things about themselves and what works well and what doesn't. So you be an ignorant coach to ignore that, but also when they see that you're meeting them kind of halfway in many ways, they'll be more open to trying different things at times, and you get that buy-in and trust, which is awesome. Richard, this might be the final quote I throw at you to dive into, where you said, yeah, there's so many guys. You need to go check out Richard's Instagram, and you'll just find a gold mine of thought-exposing content. You said on training floor, you're focused on the training floor. You are, as in Richard, is focused on technique, how far from failure someone is, not rep counting. But if they ask, you're going to say they've got 2 more left. What did you mean by
that? You've done personal training on the floor, right?
A long time ago, but yeah, I have done it.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. All right. So that was just a little bit of a fun one. That was, that's when you got athletes and you're focusing on so many different things, and it's like, you're not counting the reps. Like you focus on so many different aspects of the quality of the set, the intensity of the set, and all those sort of things. So that was just a little bit of a play on it, that it was just like 2's kind of like the standard thing. And it was just sort of so that one was a little bit more lighthearted. Don't take that one as serious as that's what I always say to people. But that was essentially just like, there's so many things to look at when you're on the floor coaching. So it's, I guess, me just being a little silly. Sorry, there's not more depth to that one. That was just a little bit of a fun one.
No, I think it highlighted something important, especially for those one-on-one PTs, but just generally thinking about it, is like the reps someone is doing, unless like for bodybuilding purposes, it's not important. Like their technique and like how close to failure are ultimately so much more important. That's what's going to drive stimulus where you want it to be. Like the specific rep goal, if they're at 10 and that was the goal, but they have 10 RER, whatever it is, they have 10 more good reps left in them. Like that's not doing what the ultimate goal, which is the stimulus that we're trying to drive. The other thing it made me think of, Richard, is at least, especially I guess this is more appropriate probably for one-on-one PT or more general pop, earlier people getting into their bodybuilding, say, like they can push harder than they think. Like, so just generally having that, like, you got 2 more, like it's good just to test the limits and see. You say 2 more, they do it, and then you're like, 2 more, go again.
So this highlights why I guess this post was so successful, right? Because like these things can be, again, like I said, inspiring thought, right? So like everything that you just said there is 100% correct, and it's probably more in depth than I thought about it. But again, like, it's the fact that it's inspired all that thought of, what it is amazing. And that, that's why I love it. Because everything you've just said there, I'm like, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Every single thing there is like absolutely spot on, and probably things that I hadn't even, dove into on that post. So that's really cool. So that's made my night hearing that post did exactly what I wanted it to do. Then it's just, inspiring, people may take it in different ways, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's really cool. So that's awesome. That's
I
really awesome.
guess would it be fair to say, Richard, that when certain posts do well, you're like, does some surprise you which ones do well and which ones don't? Or do you
Yeah.
sometimes have a feeling?
All right. I'm going to say this I don't usually say this in public. But on these social media posts, I have noticed a trend. When a post passes blame to somebody else, it tends to be really like it'll be perceived better. I don't know if I like it. It's data. It's very interesting to see, and I've tested the theory multiple times with the same writing and sort of different. So, like for example, and not that the posts are wrong, but just more things like one of the ones that went really crazy was like a coach is like your GPS. We're going to show you the most efficient roadmap, but it's still on you. You have to drive the car there. Like you have to do the work. And like something like that will go, whereas from a lot of coaches will share because it's sort of, saying like you have to. So
Yeah.
those sort of posts tend to go a little bit more. They get shared a lot more, which I found very interesting. But yeah, I think some of them do, some of them don't. I've had a couple of them that have gone crazy that I was shocked that they went crazy, and I've had a couple that I think were really good and very thought provoking, and nothing really happened to them. So yeah, it's always fun to watch what people like, or read the comments, a couple days later and see how people have taken them. And, it's like, obviously social media, like you can't put a lot of nuance into it. And, you'll put something up that's a little bit generalized, and then everyone will have a specific context for their situation that they're disagreeing with me or getting aggressive with me for, something in regard to that, where it's a little bit wild, which I'm sure you deal with as well.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah. But there are some times, man, I will have to say, like, in terms of that, is like, there's some times where I just have to, like, just say to someone, like, it's not that deep.
Yeah. Yeah.
This post was not that deep. It was supposed to be there just to have a little bit of fun. But yeah,
You're not
the
responsible
reaction.
for the way they react.
Yeah, but yeah, there's some of them I know some of them, like, if you generally put something up about effort, and athletes needing to put effort in it. I think I did one of them the other day, and it went absolutely crazy. But it's just things about, pushing effort those ones generally go, quite crazy. If I go a little bit too deep into communication, they generally don't do as well on vanity metrics, but I tend to get a lot of inquiries from it,
Cool.
which I think for anyone doing social media, that's actually a really good point that I try to tell people is there's a very large difference between like looking at successful social media posts between like, how many likes, views, comments, and shares you get versus how it's doing for your business. And a lot of
Yeah.
the time, some of these posts that I'll put up that'll get 30 or 40,000 shares do not generate me anything else than more followers. Whereas, I may have a couple posts where I'll talk a little bit more in depth about something in coaching and like you know, what's a check-in should look like, or, something in regard to that. And it's like all of a sudden now I've got 4 or 5 inquiries coming through, but the post didn't do that well. So there's a very big separation between those two, which I think, coming back to that influencers and coaches kind of thing, right? Where it's like, if
Yeah.
you're starting to chase those vanity metrics, it may hurt your business. And I think when you're a lot more specific and it's less, I always call it punchline content. Whereas if you're using sometimes with less punchline content where you can just dig in a little bit deeper, that's where, they're the ones that are getting inquiries in.
Yeah.
So
Very
yeah,
well said.
it's an interesting one. Like I think, sometimes I'll have a post that'll get 170 likes on it that will generate 5 or 6 inquiries. And then I'll get another one that has, 35, 40,000 likes that just, people just share it because they think it sounds good. There's not, not a lot of depth to it. So yeah, that's one thing I constantly have to reiterate to people is like, don't use those vanity metrics they have benefit, but at the end of the day, like, vanity metrics don't pay the bills and they're not
Yeah, very
specific
well
enough.
said.
Yeah. So, but yeah, roundabout way. Yes. Sometimes they do surprise the hell out of me and sometimes, people can be a little bit more predictable.
Yeah, I guess it's that evoking emotion and like people feel what you've posted in a sense. They want to share those thoughts and feelings because you've kind of said it in a really powerful way. But yeah, kind of good for getting exposure, getting eyes on you, but not necessarily driving kind of applications and things. So a very good takeaway for any coaches out there who are listening. You mentioned there, Richard, I think you said you've got a course, or I don't know what the right term is for it, but is that the main project you're working on at the moment? I'd love to hear a bit more about it.
Yeah, so it's called the Full Potential Academy, and for years I've wanted to develop a course, but I've always just kind of tinkered like with the idea of it and things like that. So I ended up opening a school academy. I've got different classrooms on different topics. Because I have a following through the strength and conditioning world as well. There are aspects to sets and reps, which let me separate those. Like hard skills is like diet, training methodologies, phases, things like that. And then soft skills, which is essentially like how we can communicate those things to the client. So it's essentially a mix of both. But over time, I'm uploading new content every week. We'll put out about an hour of new content every single week. And it's delving a lot more now into the soft skills side of things. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in there for coaches that will apply for not just personal trainers, but for, sports coaches and things like that on, how to, a lot of the flash words, how to actually do them, how to deal with certain personality types, how to actually hold somebody accountable, what it really means, not just a word that we use on social media, like how do you do it? Or how do we deal with certain personality types? And, there's lectures in there on, you might have a client that's all or nothing. And here's some exercises that you can give to them for, you got your sets and reps training, but we can also train mental performance. So let's get them, building in on these sort of things. So, it's been really cool. And to have, Eric Helms, was at one of the workshops. We presented together in Melbourne with JPS. And, he was a really big fan of it, which was really motivating for me, for somebody that I look up to be able to say that to me. And, we speak, pretty regularly about it now and just going through, this sort of area. And he's sort of pushing me to continue to do it because it's not really in the fitness industry too much. Because a lot of what I teach is what I've learned from the sports world. And I'm just sort of changing principles around. So the information is all through this academy. There's multiple, I think there's about 65 hours in there at the moment, and it's going more and more every week. And I've just created a certification for it. So there's an exam based off of specific classrooms. And I haven't really said this in public yet, but the first one we've just released now. And then the next one will be scenario based, where we're going to delve less into the sets and reps and more into how are we going to deal with this situation with the client. And then the third one will be implementing it all together with a client of your own choosing and running them through every process that we have over a 12-week period, helping them from training to navigating their roadblocks properly and giving them exercises for mental performance as well as training. So it's really cool. It's a little bit different, so trying to explain it to people at this minute. I haven't got that down into like a punchline, like the social media stuff that I have yet, but it's something that I'm very passionate about. And I think it's something that's not spoken about enough. It's, being able to create adherence for people. So we're not just getting results with, I guess, athletes that are already motivated. It's how do we take somebody from an average to an elite athlete through training, diet, mental performance. How do we spot issues? How do we troubleshoot it and all that? So yeah, it's a huge passion of mine. And yeah, it's like I said, every week we're updating new lectures in there, and just sort of getting frequently asked questions from coaches, and we're sort of building lectures based off of it. And yeah, it's been amazing. We got about 120 members in there already. So yeah, if anyone is interested in the soft skills of coaching and how to navigate hard skills into adherence, then yeah, come check it out.
Really cool. I think anyone who's got the amount of experience that you've got, the amount of wisdom therefore you've developed, the amount of mistakes that you've made and learned how to navigate those, to have that into a course, like, it's, to me, a bit of a no-brainer. It's just an instant level up for people who are earlier within their career or are struggling with, like you said, some of the soft skills, because a lot of the hard skills you can get from a textbook or what have you, but actually those softer skills that are much more challenging to have and navigate without experience becomes real tough, especially like as online coaches. Like I said, a lot of us are just working from home solo. We haven't got anyone to bounce ideas off. So yeah, it sounds like a great course, and it's lovely you found a passion, like, as an aside to your coaching, because certainly I think about projects sometimes. I'm like, there's already this. So to find something to sink your teeth into is awesome for yourself as well. So I'll make sure I link that so people can learn more about it and get involved.
I'll drop a little bit, just something where I was doing with Eric recently in the talk is like, being able to, for an example would be for general population clients. And we have a really good system here where, we understand that people are pretty connected to scale weight because it's a singular number, and they look at higher is worse, lower is better if they're trying to get leaner. And we know that that's just how people operate. So we've developed a system to create that numerical singular number for habits. And we gamify their water intake, their steps, their everything. And we have essentially a scoreboard that we use every day. And then we try to build that. So we try to get them to focus more on, the number of all of their combined habits versus the scale weight. And then, so just things like that we'll have in there. So, yeah, it's different. It's very, very different. But, yeah, like I said, it's awesome.
Get some process oriented, and that's the way to go. I love it. Like, these are, again, it sounds similar to like little things I've made in my spreadsheet to help my clients that I'm just like, I've tinkered with over the years, like check boxes or like, scoring things. And again, to get those insights from you, I think will be invaluable. So yeah, get involved, guys. I'll make sure that's linked in the description, and also your Instagram, I'll make sure that's linked, as that's where many of these quotes have come from, and a lot of the inspiration has come from for this podcast. Is there anywhere else people should be heading to kind of learn more from you, Richard?
You got to remember, Steve, I'm old, so I don't do a lot of the social media. I don't have TikTok. I don't have any of those things. So if you want, no website, unfortunately. You're exposing me here. I need to do this stuff. But yeah, Instagram, I've got all the, any inquiries for mentoring, or any inquiries for lecturing or coaching or anything like that. It's all through Instagram. But since I closed my business down, I've had to recently change my Instagram name. So I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head what it was, but hopefully you'll get it linked in there. But
Richard_Collins coach.
There you
I have
go.
it here.
That's how bad I am.
But I'll make it sure it's linked.
Yeah, I go on and I do my quote and I get off. So yeah,
that's good. That's a good way to be in. Yeah, don't worry, I'm old too. It's I'm not big on the social media apart from YouTube and Instagram. So I appreciate you, Richard. Appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
I'm sure we'll do this again. And thank you guys for listening. Please always share, like, love, all that good stuff. And we'll catch you in the next one. Take care.